Hiya! My name is Rhiannon, or Kiwichi, and welcome to episode 3 of the Japan vlog series. I am so sorry that it's taken such a long time for me to upload this episode. I originally decided to change up my editing style a little bit and recorded this with a script. I ended up really hating the scripted video. It felt really boring and monotone and I just didn't like it. I ended up deciding to re-record everything, so welcome to episode 3. Now, just to give a really quick recap of where we left off, we originally flew into Tokyo, where we spent one night before getting a train down to Kyoto. The first day in Kyoto, we saw Fushimi Inari Taisha and Nishiki Market before getting completely lost with a dead phone, dead portable charger, and not knowing the way back to the hostel. The only way I found my way back to the hostel was by finding a pachinko parlor across the street from it that I recognised. And honestly guys, do you think I should rethink my stance on gambling? Because that feels like a really big sign. The next day I went to see the Higoshi Hoganji Temple and Nijojo Castle before going to the Pokemon Center and then getting a train all the way down to Osaka. I stayed one night in the hostel in Osaka and then went to Osaka Castle Gardens, which is where we've left off. After taking a few photos in Osaka Castle Gardens, I ended up exploring a little bit more. The gardens themselves were a little bit smaller than I had expected. They felt more like a big park, but it was really pretty and it was lovely weather, so it was really nice to explore. I did see a really big crow, which I took lots of photos and videos of, including this video of it cawing. Listen to this. If you can't tell by now, crows are my favourite animal, so I do get really excited whenever I see one. I explored the gardens a little bit more before deciding that the weather was just too hot for me. I was melting into an actual puddle. I ended up going over to the castle itself, but on my way there, found a takoyaki stand and decided that I'd have takoyaki for breakfast. I mean, come on, when else do you have the option to have takoyaki in Osaka for breakfast? I had with it a weird little special edition Pepsi Max, but it was kind of mid, so I don't really recommend it. But the takoyaki itself was delicious. I ate it really quickly, then went towards the castle grounds, which were packed with people. I got into the queue to go into the castle, where I realised you were supposed to pre-book your ticket. After a little bit of panic, there was a QR code which I scanned to buy my ticket, so problem solved. I went into the castle and was greeted by the beautiful air conditioning, which was honestly probably my favourite part of the day. Floor 1 of the castle was mostly an information floor. There was a few bits of artwork, including this cool golden tiger, but all of the actual exhibitions were on the floors above. Floor 2 was an exhibition on the history of the Osaka castle. It had lots of information and even a samurai dress-up area, which I chickened out of doing because I was alone and it felt a little bit weird to do a samurai dress-up on my own. Maybe next time if I ever go back with someone else. I then headed up to the 3rd floor. Now the 3rd and 4th floor you weren't allowed to film in, so I'm just going to run through some of the stuff that was up there. Floor 3 was a history on Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who was a clan leader in the 1500s. This particular floor focused on the unification of Japan and the role the Toyotomi clan had in that. Now, one of the things the Toyotomi clan were famous for was something called a swords hunt, which is where they disarmed all the peasants and took all their swords and weapons. Part of the way they did this was by convincing the peasants with religion. They told everyone that they were going to melt down the swords to build a big Buddha statue, and that if they give up their swords willingly, it would make them have a favourable afterlife. Now, these sword hunts were part of the Toyotomi clan building a rigid 4-tier class system, which included things like peasants and samurai. Now, 4th floor then focused on the war in Osaka in 1615. This war saw the fall of the Toyotomi clan and the rise of the Tokugawa clan. Now, it is worth mentioning that the rigid 4-tier class system I mentioned before might have been part of the reason that the Toyotomi clan fell to the Tokugawa clan, because by disarming the peasants and making such a rigid 4-tier class system, they prevented anyone else from rising in the ranks to become a samurai, which meant that when the Tokugawa clan came to all the outer villages in Osaka, no one could fight back. I don't know too much about the history of Japan or whether the sword hunts were a good or bad thing, but I'd love to hear thoughts in the comments from anyone who did study history or knows a little bit more about it than I do. Now, the 6th floor, which is the floor that focused on Toyotomi Hideshi's personal life, it had a number of artifacts and interactive exhibitions which were really fun to engage with. And then we jump up to the final floor, which is floor 8 with the observation deck. Now, I went up to the observation deck and took a lot of videos and photos. It's really cool and really high up, so you can get a really good view of Osaka. But the entire time I was up there, my legs were shaking because I am terrified of heights. I honestly don't quite know how I managed to stay up there long enough to walk around the whole observation deck, but I managed to do it and then scurried back in and then went to the gift shop where I got this really cute pink fan, which honestly was really necessary in the really warm weather. Then when I was finished up in the castle, I went back outside, went to this little Lawson's vending machine area and bought myself an ice cream and just sat down and charged up my phone so I did not have a repeat of what happened in Kyoto. Once my phone was all charged up, I then decided to get on the train to Shinsaibashi. But the train station I went to actually felt like the back rooms. Where is this? Where am I? This is like one of the weirdest train stations I've ever had to walk through. When I got to Shinsaibashi, I ended up looking around loads of shops. I was quite excited to go on a little bit of a shopping spree. I found this really cool alternative clothes store where I ended up actually finding a really nice jumper that was in my size. Thank you to the really nice shop attendants who helped me find something in my size. I usually really struggle to find anything in Japan in my size, so it was really nice to find such a cute jumper. After a little bit more looking around, I then found an anime store which had lots of figurines and artwork and even had these little cards, and my favourite one was this Dangers in My Heart card because I really love that anime. It's so cute. I walked around lots of familiar and unfamiliar stores. I even found this really adorable cinema roll cafe which I didn't record anything in. But I did take a really cute photo, so here it is. And keeping on theme, I also did some shopping at the Sanrio store. This is my favourite character, Hanamaru Obake. After lots of walking around and a little bit of shopping, I ended up going to the Dotonbori River, which was so crowded, but such a cool experience. Also, look at this guy. And like the slave to capitalism I am, taking photos with the advertisements there. Now, I grew up in London and I always found it a little bit weird when people would take pictures with the advertisements in Piccadilly Circus, but here it makes total sense. I do think though, in this case, the advertisements are a lot more unique. I mean, you have the giant Glyco running man, and there was even a massive crab on one side of the river, so I felt a little bit more normal about taking photos there. Aww. I didn't have too much more planned for the rest of the day in Osaka, so I then decided to stroll back down the river until I found my way back down to my hostel, where I just relaxed and had an early night. It's 5 AM. I've got to get up really quickly. I don't want to miss my train. The next morning, I woke up super early, ready for my early morning train to Kagoshima. I said goodbye to the really cool hostel and made my way to the train station. I then spent 3.5 hours on the Shinkansen, eating a corn dog and staring out of the window like I was in an indie film. And because I have a complete inability to arrive to anything on time, I ended up getting to Kagoshima way too early. And I had so many bags at this point that I felt really weighed down and uncomfortable and needed to figure out something to do. I ended up putting all my bags in a coin locker and spending the next few hours in a mall. In the mall, I went to a really nice bookstore where I picked up a few manga volumes, including this honey lemon soda. I then went to a Sanrio store and a music store where there were some really cool guitars that I had to show huge restraint not to buy because I wouldn't have had any way to take them back. I then did a little bit more shopping around, buying some essentials from drugstores and things like that, before going up to the top floor, which was the entertainment floor. Now there was a cinema there, but I did feel like maybe going to see a movie in a language that I could only somewhat speak wouldn't be the best thing to do. So instead I ended up going to the arcade. And I had incredible luck in this arcade. I ended up winning an Ocarina figurine really quickly in like 3 goes. And then won a Kuromi plushie in just 1 go. It cost me 100 yen. It does now sit on the top of my bookshelf like a trophy. After spending a little bit more time in the arcade, I then looked at my watch and decided it was time to head towards the ferry depot. Now, my original plan to get to the ferry depot was to get an Uber because it would make the most sense. But I learnt quickly that Kagoshima doesn't have Uber. But I thought that's fine, I'll use whatever the next best thing is, and looked up taxis in Kagoshima. And I found an app for taxis in Kagoshima, so I was like, great, let's get this sorted. But the app didn't work for me because I didn't have a Japanese phone number. That's when I started to panic a little bit. I quickly looked up other routes to get to the ferry depot because I assumed I'd probably be able to get like a bus to it or something. But no, the only way for me to get there was a half-an-hour walk. At this point, it was an hour until my ferry left. So I don't know if you've been on ferries before, but they usually have periods of either 30 minutes or 15 minutes before the ferry departs where you're not allowed to get on anymore. So I was panicking. I had half an hour to get there. It was a half-an-hour walk. I had to run. I was speed walking through Kagoshima in the blazing heat, trying to get to this ferry on time. The actual ferry depot itself, it was a really bizarre spot with lots of cargo pallets. It was clearly meant to be more accessible by car. When I actually got to the ferry depot itself, there was no one in the first floor, so I started panicking that I had completely missed the ferry. I'm boiling. I just walked about 20 minutes, but it's so humid here and I got a bit confused about where to go to board the ferry, so I had to ask someone. But I think I figured it out, so I'm just going up there now. My only worry is that my email with my ticket is completely in Japanese and I can't quite read it all, so I hope I didn't need to do anything with the email. But when I went up to the second floor, luckily there was some really kind staff that got my ticket sorted and let me onto the ferry in just enough time. Now, when I got onto the ferry, I head straight to my room where there was an interesting sleeping arrangement. Now, I knew I was going to be sharing my room with other women because that's the kind of room I'd booked, but what I didn't expect was the sleeping arrangement to be individual tatami mats rolled out directly next to each other with no space in between, which meant if you had a full room, you would be sleeping directly next to another person. I wasn't used to a layout like that. Also, for some reason, the pillows were not pillows and they were more like little cubes that were really just uncomfortable. Luckily, in my room, there was only 2 other women. It was a 12-person room, so we ended up with plenty of space between us. The 2 people I was rooming with were 2 older Japanese ladies who were very curious about why I was traveling alone in what was quite a residential ferry, but they didn't speak a lick of English, so every question they asked me was in Japanese and I had to fight for my life to answer them because my Japanese isn't that good. But I ended up having a lovely little chat with them before heading off to sleep and accepting the cube pillow as my fate. And I think that's where I'm gonna leave off, with a weird sleeping arrangement, a rocking ferry, and things starting to actually go right in this travel. Thank you so much for watching. I am really sorry again that it took so long to get this video posted. I'm going to edit this as quickly as possible and get it posted as soon as possible. What is exciting is that I have finally made a video that is not to do with the Japan series that I am going to be posting soon as well. So keep an eye out for that, and keep an eye out for the next episode in this series, because honestly, the trip only gets more exciting as I go on. If you haven't yet and you want to watch episode 1 and 2, I have linked them all together in a playlist on my channel, so do definitely have a look. Thank you so much for watching. Comment below if you know anything more to do with the history of Osaka, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!